Greetings. Welcome to another episode of Powered by Nyame. I'm your guide and host, Gracie Canadu. Welcome back. This week's topic is power. And with that, I want to start with a definition, which I'm going to repeat to make sure that we have at least some baseline to work with. So, the definition of power that I like to work with is something like this. Power is the ability to define reality and to have others accept that reality as their own. Once more, power is the ability to define reality and have others accept that reality as their own. Now, with that baseline, there'll be a number of examples that would actually conform to that baseline definition, and there'll be some that will actually differ from it. Either way, I want to give us at least have a common language, a common ground. Now, speaking of language, I want to use a concept from the Akan Chi language, and the concept is tumi. And tumi roughly translates in most English dictionaries and in common speech as power. Now, tumi is actually about ability and capacity. Tumi is the ability and capacity to do something or to have something done. It's sort of like the verb to be, but more so in the sense of can do. Tumi is also translated as authority, again, linking back to power. Now, remember our definition. The ability to define, right? That's key. Because tumi is about ability and capacity, right? The ability to do something. And so the person whom has power over others is referred to as otumfo. That is, he or she with the capacity and ability to have power over people. And so, to me, is also a guiding concept for our conversation that we're going to have in this episode. Now, there are different kinds of power and even powers that exist in this world of ours, in this reality that we can, apprehend and that we live in. Let's start with, let's say, political power. Because for many of you in the United States, it's election year. And that means all kind of political campaigns and persuasions and gimmicks and the like is flooding your eyes and ears and nostrils and every part of your being every day. Now, I'm not here to endorse nor to argue against any political party or the candidate thereof. But what I will say is this. We human beings are all politicians. What I mean by that? I mean this. We human beings seek to manipulate other human beings in order to have some modicum, some inch or some mile of power over them, some influence over them, some authority over them. And as simple as looking at the basic unit of any community, which is the family. There is an authority structure there. The parents are under the authority of their parents. In this case, it would be the grandparents in some cases. And the children are under the authority of the parents. The older siblings have authority over the younger siblings, and so on and so forth. So there's already a vertical hierarchy in terms of power and authority that exists in the most common structure across all human society, which is the family. Of course, you extend that out into a community, whatever configuration of that community, you will have more bureaucracy, but the same vertical hierarchy structure. Now, there's some societies that are stateless. That is, they have more of a loose confederation, sort of when need to, they'll organize themselves. But even then, there is a what? A chain of command, a structure of authority, and therefore how power is actually metered out, how power flows, who has it, who doesn't, and so on and so forth. So power is the filament that runs through all human communities, all human society, because it has to, right? Because power is about the ability to do, and in many cases, exercising it means having certain capacity over those with that ability or with less of that ability. Now, since we're in the political season, politicians, and we all have the politician in us, they seek power over people through the mechanism of manipulation. There is manipulation, then there's inspiration. I'll come to inspiration a little bit later. For now, politicians work through manipulation. That is, all of the speeches and ads and campaigns and so-called debates and other kinds of gimmickry that runs across our TV screens and the airwaves and any other online and standard platforms, including billboards and like. These are all intended to influence or manipulate the opinion, the mind, and the consciousness of the would-be voters. Now, because politicians use their power, that is, whatever authority that they have, what they claim in becoming a politician, there's limits to this power. You see, manipulation only goes about so far, because sooner or later, usually sooner than later, those people who are persuaded or convinced of the politician's language and sloganeering, they will come to realize and see through the campaign. They'll see through the slogan. They'll see through the dogma. And this goes for political parties. It goes for organizations, political organizations, or ideological organizations. It doesn't matter. Or religious organization. It doesn't matter the stripe of organizations. This matter of power and authority runs through them. Manipulation is the ground floor upon which their power stands. It does, right? And that's why, whether it is a church, whether it is a synagogue or a mosque, or whether it is a Democratic Party or Republican Party or whatever organization you want to find, manipulation is the ground floor for how power is exercised and plays out in those spaces, right? Now, there are other kinds of powers that exist in this world. And I want to give you another character other than the politician, which is the healer. And most healers, they are not self-interested, but selfless, that they serve community and serve the families thereof. Those are the healers I'm speaking of in this moment. For those healers, power is not something to be used to exercise over people or the territories in which people live, and therefore, if you control the territory, you control the people thereof. But power is more so to be used to intervene, to provide some level of conduit, right? Again, power is the filament that runs through all human societies. And so healers tap into, exchange or in conversation with this power or those powers of spiritual forces and beings, the trees that are right behind me, the sunshine that is flowing through this particular episode, the wind that is blowing. All of these are powers that are operating in this moment. The sunshine, the wind, right? The leaves that are moving by the wind. All these are powers that have been activated, that are there. And they can be manipulated, yes, for a certain outcome. But at a certain point, powers cannot be manipulated. Let me give you an example. Take suicide. Most people think that suicide is the power to take your own life. And most people believe that. Now, I don't buy that argument, and here's why. I don't buy that argument, and I use suicide as a metaphor for a lot of other things that we can talk about regarding power. And so, notice that there are many people who attempt suicide, slit their wrists, put a rope around their necks, take tons of over-the-counter and even prescribed drugs, and they don't die. And they do this multiple times, which is to say that they don't have the power or they don't have the authority to determine the outcome of their human existence. You see, there is power, and then there are powers, and there's the power, right? And so in this scale of powers between power, human power, politicians, pastors, pimps, prostitutes, hustlers, you name it, they all use manipulation. They have a certain kind of power. Parents, right? And I'm using P purposely. So that's one kind of power and authority. Then there is, of course, powers, right? That could be spiritual beings, forces, figures, etc. Then there is the power, right? And in the scale of powers, we have a certain ceiling to what we consider to be our power and authority, right? And that ceiling is, there's a ceiling to being manipulated. There's a ceiling to being influenced and persuaded by human orchestrated and manipulated power. There's also a limit to how much spiritual beings and forces can actually interact and manipulate you for a certain outcome and end, whether it be ancestral or of nature or of the cosmos. But then there is the power. And that's where it's a different story. And so I circle back to suicide, because when it comes to suicide, our name and our number, when it's time for both to be called, for us to return, to our spiritual home and return to the village, as they say, we don't decide that and we don't control that. And that's what I want us to drive home about this notion of power, is that there is a certain power that we give up to others because we are being manipulated rather than being inspired. You see, the power gives us a playing field in which to exercise and carry out our human existence and make our decisions, and to essentially ride with the consequence of those decisions, right? And some may say, well, this creative force or the power or the supreme being, why do you allow this to happen? Why do you do this? Are you good or are you evil? And so on. I put all those discussions to the side. The point I want to make is that there is much more power that we have in our decision making, in our determination to shape our human existence. But there's also consequences to exercising that power. And when then things don't work out, we cannot go ahead and blame the power for our decisions. Because in other words, the power is unlimited in its power and authority, whereas our power has a ceiling and is very limited in many ways. And so when you have limited power, trying to essentially appeal to unlimited power and say, hey, why didn't you come to my rescue? Why didn't you help me out then? I needed this money, I needed this house, I needed this car. I prayed, I didn't get it. That's when we have confusion about what power is, and which is really the purpose of this episode here, to sort of help to demystify the scales of power, how human manipulated and orchestrated power works and doesn't work, what are its limitations, but also spiritual power and its limitations, and of course the power, which is a matter of without limitation. And that these powers all converge onto each and every living creature, including us human beings, to make this world and this reality what it is. And so power is indeed the ability to define reality and have others accept it as their own. But that is simply what? A human definition and a human concept of power. Because the power, right, doesn't define reality, it is reality. The power, right, isn't about ability or capacity, it is ability and capacity. Notice I say it, I didn't say he or she, it, because it is a what? It is an immaterial force. It is an energy, massive energy and force that can't be brought down into a single concept or a single figure or a single soul. The power, right, does not rest on manipulation. Notice the second part of my definition, right? Have others accept that definition as their own. That's manipulation. That's not inspiration. What I want us to think about, and actually what I'm pushing us toward, poking us towards, is a definition of power that's more about inspiration rather than manipulation. How does that work? Simple. Give you a few examples. Power or empowering someone works by inspiration, meaning being the example for them, giving without expecting a reward or the same with interest in return. That is inspiration. It's empowering without expecting, and therefore it gives the person receiving, I can do the same, right? That's empowering, that's liberating, right? which moves us out of this frame of reference to human designs and orchestrations of power, which of course is very limited. It's based on manipulation. Inspiration also looks like not sheer encouragement, but selflessly acting for others, right? While tending to your own. In other words, you cannot feed somebody else while you're starving. So once you've taken care of your own, you can simultaneously be selfless and share, with others who are less fortunate. And these are not simply acts that are going to give you blessings. These are the ways in which we use inspiration to empower, because guess what? By being selfless, you raise the level of your own self-healing power and authority. You raise the level of your own powers and abilities, your to me. And by empowering others, you raise their level. You see that? It's a matching grant. You give without expecting to return. You receive and elevate. You also give the receiver something that elevates them. And so that is inspiration. It's a multiplying effect, right? Then people may hear about that. I say, yes, this is a person that, gives selflessly. Now remember, giving is wonderful, but giving has to be done again from the soul and in moderation. By moderation, I mean just giving and giving your all doesn't do it. Giving and giving because there's a recipient that will in fact be elevated from it, and you too be elevated. I know some people who will give and give until they're exhausted, until they're powerless. That's not what I'm suggesting. That's what I'm saying, in moderation, in modicum, right? In moderation, within reason. And so power, to me, right, can be driven by manipulation, which is most human beings, most human societies, but also be driven by inspiration. And that's what message I want to leave you with, that there's much more of a broader net effect by using our humanly derived powers, that is our ability, our to me, to inspire than to manipulate. And so there's no need to define reality for others if we're engaged in the inspiration kind of power that has a multiplying, a large casting net effect upon yourself and others. Because by empowering yourself and others, you then create a broad network and a net effect that is not only will radiate wide and far, it will also make sure that people do not relinquish and give away their power to those who don't deserve it, and therefore becomes manipulated. Because the antidote to manipulation is inspiration. When people are inspired and empowered, manipulation can't work. And we have too many of us in this world have been awfully manipulated by a range of people. And you know who they are, whether they're kinfolks, friends, family, community members, politicians, pastors, you name it, parents. And so the antidote to manipulation is the self-healing power and authority that comes from inspiration. I hope this episode has given you some inspiration that will allow you to be much more impactful in your daily walkings. For Powered by Nyame, I've been your guide and host, Kwesi Kunadu, or Rayan. Until next time, stay well.